Ground controllers at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California cheering as the Mars Perseverance rover made a successful touchdown on Mars.
The Mars 2020 mission delivered a rover the size of a car, but the real story was the tiny drone hiding in its belly. This drone, Ingenuity, descended onto Mars for one reason: to die. It was a test, a long shot, but it didn't fail. It flew. And it kept flying for 3 years. The footage it sent back was mind-blowing. It saw things the rover never could, including wreckage from its own landing craft and strange hexagonal patterns on the ground that looked anything but natural. Defying a dead atmosphere, on February 18, 2021, the world watched as a 1-ton rover named Perseverance hit the top of the Martian atmosphere. It was traveling at 13,000 miles per hour. In just 7 minutes, it had to slow down and land, all on its own. This fiery automated plunge is what engineers call the 7 minutes of terror. It's a time when everything can, and often does, go wrong. Mars is famous for being a graveyard of failed missions, but this time, the landing was perfect. The rover touched down in a desolate, rocky plain called Jezero Crater, but the rover wasn't the biggest gamble of the mission. The real long shot was a tiny 4-pound stowaway, folded up in the rover's belly. It was a helicopter named Ingenuity. You see, the thing nobody tells you is that flying on Mars should be impossible. The planet's atmosphere is the problem. It is incredibly thin. On Earth, we live at the bottom of a thick, heavy ocean of air. On Mars, the atmosphere is only 1% as thick. Flying a helicopter on Earth is easy because the blades have a lot of air to grip and push down. Flying on Mars is like trying to fly a helicopter on Earth at an altitude of 100,000 feet. To put it mildly, no helicopter has ever flown that high. Our air is just too thin up there. So, to even attempt this on another world, Ingenuity had to be a machine that defied physics. It was built to be impossibly light, weighing just 4 pounds. Its body is a small box, about the size of a tissue box, but its blades are the real marvel. It has 2 sets of blades, spinning in opposite directions so the drone doesn't just spin out of control. Each blade is 4 feet long and made of a special, stiff, lightweight carbon fiber. And here's the kicker: they were designed to spin at an unbelievable 2,500 revolutions per minute. That is 10 times faster than a passenger helicopter on Earth. They had to spin that fast just to bite into the whisper-thin Martian air. But the air wasn't even the biggest challenge. The cold was. Mars is a frozen desert. When the sun goes down, the temperature in Jezero Crater plunges to negative 200 degrees Fahrenheit. This is a cold so deep it can crack metal. It can shatter sensitive electronics. Ingenuity's batteries were not designed to work in that kind of cold. So, Ingenuity's first mission wasn't to fly. It was just to survive one night. After the rover dropped it onto the dust, the drone was all alone. It had to use its small solar panel to gather just enough sunlight to charge its batteries. Then, all night long, it had to run a tiny critical heater. This heater burned precious battery power, not to fly, but just to keep its guts, its flight computer and batteries, from freezing solid. For days, the team back on Earth waited. Every morning, they'd check the signal. Was it still alive? It was. It had survived the endless night. Finally, on April 19, 2021, the command was sent. This was the most terrifying part. Because Mars is so far away, there's a communications delay. It can be up to 20 minutes. That means you can't fly the drone with a joystick. By the time you saw it was in trouble, it would have already crashed 20 minutes ago. Ingenuity had to fly all by itself. The commands were sent. Take off, climb to 10 feet, hover, land, and then silence. The entire mission control room at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory just waited. They stared at their screens. All they could do was hope. Then the telemetry beamed back across millions of miles. A voice in the control room called out, "Ingenuity is airborne." The room exploded. Grown engineers were in tears. It had worked. The very first footage the drone sent back was grainy, black and white. It was from a small navigation camera on its belly, pointing straight down. It showed its own 4 legs lifting off the red dust. And then, as it climbed, it showed its own shadow cast on the alien soil. It was the first time in history humanity had seen the shadow of an aircraft on another world. This was it. This was the Wright brothers moment on Mars. The first great shock wasn't a mystery, it was a miracle. It was the proof that humanity was no longer just a species that could walk on other worlds. Now, we could fly on them, but this first flight was just the test. The real shock was what happened next when Ingenuity turned its color camera on the landscape. What the drone saw in the Delta. Ingenuity was never supposed to be a science mission. It was a technology demonstrator. Its entire purpose was to fly 5 times to prove it could be done. After that, it was supposed to be abandoned, and the Perseverance rover would drive off and leave it behind. But the drone didn't just work. It worked perfectly. So, it got a new mission. It became an aerial scout. Its job was to fly ahead of the billion-dollar rover, mapping the terrain, spotting dangers, and finding the most interesting places to explore. And this is when the footage started coming back that left scientists speechless. The drone wasn't just seeing rocks and dust. It was seeing the ghost of a completely different planet. You see, what many overlooked is where they landed. Jezero Crater isn't just a random hole in the ground. It was chosen for one reason. It's an ancient, dried-up lake. Billions of years ago, this 28-mile-wide crater was filled to the brim with liquid. Water, a massive river used to flow into it, carving a huge, fan-shaped delta into the crater wall. This is a place where, if life ever existed on Mars, this is where we would find the evidence. The problem was, the rover could only see things from the ground. It was like trying to understand the Grand Canyon by just looking at the pebbles at your feet. Ingenuity, on the other hand, could fly. It could see the big picture. On its 13th flight, Ingenuity flew over the delta. It descended low, skimming just 33 feet above the ground. Its high-resolution color camera was pointed at the landscape. The footage it sent back was breathtaking. It wasn't a random jumble of rocks. It was layers. The entire delta was made of perfectly stacked layers of rock, one on top of the other. This was the wow factor. These were sedimentary rocks. The only way these layers can form is when mud, silt, and sand slowly settle at the bottom of a deep, calm body of water over thousands or even millions of years. The drone was flying over the bottom of a long, dead lake. It was the first high-definition aerial proof that Mars was once a wet, watery world. But it got even crazier. As the drone flew, its camera spotted tiny dark spheres like little pebbles embedded all over the rocks. Scientists, buzzing with excitement, called them blueberries. These iron-rich spherules, or concretions, were first spotted by the Opportunity rover on the other side of Mars years earlier. But Ingenuity's footage showed they were everywhere in this old lake bed. The thing is, these blueberries are a huge clue. They can only form when minerals precipitate out of flowing acidic water. The drone was flying over the remains of an ancient rushing river. Then Ingenuity flew to a different part of the crater and sent back images that baffled geologists. The ground was covered in perfect geometric hexagonal patterns. It looked artificial. It looked like a tiled floor. But not all things are what they seem. This was a natural formation, just like the Giant's Causeway in Ireland. It was basalt. It proved that this area billions of years ago wasn't just a lake. It was also volcanically active. Massive lava flows had cooled, cracked, and shrunk into these perfect six-sided columns. The drone's footage was painting a picture of a Mars that was dynamic, violent, and looked shockingly like a young Earth. On another flight, it flew over the flat plains that were once the lake's beach. The footage was so clear, you could see ripple marks in the ancient mudstone. These weren't ripples from wind. They were the unmistakable preserved footprints of waves lapping on a shore, frozen in time for 3.5 billion years. The footage was a time machine. The shock was no longer just about the flight. It was the sudden, stark realization that the barren red tomb we see today was a lie. It was once a blue planet. It had deep lakes, rushing rivers, active volcanoes, and beaches with lapping waves. This ancient watery past was stunning, but the drone also had to survive the planet's violent present. Battling the red planet, flying on Mars wasn't just a challenge of physics. It was a constant battle for survival. The thing nobody tells you is that Ingenuity was flying completely blind, deaf, and alone. That 20-minute communication delay meant every single flight was a terrifying gamble. The real hero of the mission wasn't the blades. It was the AI. The drone was completely autonomous. Scientists on Earth would map out a basic flight path, pointing it in a direction. They would send the commands. And then they would just hope. Ingenuity's tiny onboard computer had to do all the work. It used a laser altimeter to measure its height off the ground. It used its black and white navigation camera to take 30 pictures every second, tracking the features on the ground to know where it was going. This AI had to make split-second decisions. If a sudden, unexpected gust of wind pushed it toward a crater wall, mission control couldn't save it. It was dodging boulders the size of cars with no human help. And the dangers were everywhere. The first was the dust. Martian dust, or regolith, isn't like the soft dust in your house. It's a fine powder as sharp as microscopic glass. And it's statically charged. It sticks to everything. This dust was Ingenuity's mortal enemy. It caked its solar panel, threatening to starve it of power. Every single flight was a desperate race to complete its mission and land in a sunny spot just to get enough charge to survive the next night. And the nights were getting harder. The mission was only supposed to last 30 days in the Martian spring. But the drone kept flying and flying as the seasons changed. As Mars moved away from the sun, the nights got longer and colder. The drone's tiny heater had to work overtime. Then, in May of 2021, the team faced a nightmare. They lost contact. One morning, the drone just didn't phone home. The signal was gone. For days, they waited. They feared the cold had finally won, that its batteries had frozen and cracked, that the mission was over. It turns out the drone's power levels had dropped so low that its internal clock reset. It froze. It died. But it was designed for this. When the sun finally rose high enough, the solar panel caught a ray of light. Its computer rebooted and it sent a signal. The drone had come back from the dead, but the cold was nothing compared to the weather. In early 2022, a massive regional dust storm descended on Jezero Crater. The sky turned a dark, hazy red. For weeks, the sun was blotted out. This was a wow factor of the worst kind. Ingenuity is solar-powered. No sun means no power. Its battery levels began to plummet. It hunkered down, just trying to survive, running only its heater. NASA was sure this was the end. But the little drone was tougher than anyone thought. When the skies finally cleared weeks later, it woke up, charged its batteries, and was ready to fly again. And then it saw the monsters. The drone's footage began capturing massive, swirling tracks in the dust. They looked like giant snake trails. These were the paths of dust devils, Mars's version of tornadoes. But these are not like Earth's. Martian dust devils can be 6 miles high and hundreds of feet wide. They are spinning vortexes of static charged dust, sucking up regolith at over 50 miles per hour. In 2022, Ingenuity had a close call. Its onboard sensors detected a massive vortex, 100 feet wide, passing right by it. The drone's own footage showed the sky itself seeming to move as the pressure wave hit it. It was surviving forces that could tear a machine apart. The drone survived all of this. It survived the cold, the dark, the dust, and the monsters. But what it found next opened up a whole new can of worms, sparking a massive controversy. Is it ancient or alien? This is where the story gets strange. The official footage of the lake bed was shocking enough, but many people are crazy about the anomalies. The things in the footage that just don't add up. You see, the drone wasn't just scouting, it was finding things that looked out of place. This is where the wild theories begin. The first truly bizarre discovery happened on Flight 26. Ingenuity was flying over a desolate patch of sand dunes. Its mission was to photograph its own landing gear, the parachute and the back shell that it had jettisoned during the 7 minutes of terror months earlier. The rover couldn't get to this area, it was too dangerous. But the drone could. It flew over the wreckage. The footage was eerie. It showed the massive 80-foot parachute covered in red dust. It showed the cone-shaped back shell smashed into pieces. It was shocking to see this human-made debris, our own trash, scattered across this ancient landscape. It looked like an alien artifact. But then, the drone's camera spotted something else. A piece of the lander's thermal blanket had been blown over a mile away. It was a small, silvery piece of debris. And this is where the first theory started. What if that's not a thermal blanket? What if this glint was something else? The footage was just clear enough to see it, but just fuzzy enough to be mysterious. It gets much weirder. On Flight 25, Ingenuity was flying over a different series of sand dunes when its camera spotted something that made geologists sit up. It was a long, winding, raised ridge that snaked across the crater floor for miles. It looked like the buried spine of a giant creature. The official explanation? They called it an inverted river channel. The idea is that an ancient river carved a path, and that path was filled with harder, stronger rock. Over billions of years, the wind blew away all the softer rock around it, leaving the old hard riverbed raised up. A perfectly natural explanation, but not everyone is convinced. The thing is, the ridge looks too perfect, too symmetrical. Online forums lit up. People watching this were looking for a mystery. Some theories suggested it was the fossilized remains of a massive ancient creature. A more down-to-earth theory suggested it looked artificial, like a buried tube or an ancient wall created by a long-gone civilization. The drone's footage was just grainy enough to fuel the fire. Then there are the blueberries, those little iron spheres. The official story is that they are hematite concretions, just a neat mineral deposit. But the credible fiction that many people find compelling is, what if they're not? On Earth, some types of bacteria and fungi are known to create perfectly spherical structures called stromatolites as they consume minerals in the water. They look just like the Martian blueberries. Ingenuity's footage showed these things weren't rare, they were everywhere in the old lake bed, a place that we now know had acidic water, minerals, and volcanic energy. To put it mildly, it is the perfect recipe for life. And then there's the methane. This is the biggest wow factor of all. The Perseverance rover on the ground has a sensor for sniffing the air, and several times it has detected puffs of methane gas. This is a huge deal. On Earth, almost all methane comes from two sources: geology, like volcanoes, or biology, like bacteria. Mars is not supposed to have active volcanoes. So, where is the methane coming in from? Ingenuity's entire flight path took it right over the areas where the methane was detected. Was its real mission to fly over these methane vents and find the source? Did its high-resolution camera see cracks in the ground where gas, and maybe life, is escaping from underground? And what about the anomalies in the footage itself? On Flight 51, as the drone was flying high, its camera caught a glint, a flash of light in the distance. The official story is that it was a cosmic ray, a high-energy particle from space, hitting the camera sensor. But it looked different. It looked like it was moving. Was it just a sensor flare, or was it a reflection from something metallic, something buried in the dust that the drone was never meant to see? The drone was getting closer to the truth, and then its mission came to a sudden, violent end. An accident, or something else. The end came on January 18, 2024. Ingenuity was a seasoned veteran. It had cheated its own demise for nearly 3 years. Its original mission was just 5 flights. It was now on its 72nd. The flight was supposed to be a simple one, a short hop up to 40 feet to test its systems and relocate. It flew up, it hovered, and it began to descend. And then, silence. Mission control lost contact. This had happened before, during the cold nights, but this time was different. The signal didn't come back. For a full day, the team waited, staring at their screens, hoping the drone would wake up. Finally, a partial signal came through. It wasn't telemetry. It wasn't a health report. It was a single, final, shocking image. The image was from Ingenuity's own color camera, pointing down at the ground. It showed the drone's shadow on the sand, just as it had on its very first flight. But something was terribly, terribly wrong. Lying on the ground a few feet away from the shadow was the black tip of a rotor blade. It had snapped clean off. The drone had suffered a hard landing. The mission was over. Later, the Perseverance rover was able to drive closer. It took pictures of the fallen drone from a distance. The images were heartbreaking. Ingenuity was upright, but its blades were shattered. Its long 3-year journey, which had covered over 10 miles of alien terrain, was finished. But how did it happen? Are we missing a key detail? The official story is that during its descent, the drone's navigation system got confused. It was landing in a sandy trap, a patch of sand that was very bland, with no rocks for its camera to track. The AI got lost. It thought it was somewhere else, and it came down too hard at the wrong angle. One of its 4-foot blades struck the ground, and the carbon fiber shattered. A simple, tragic accident. But not all things are what they seem. The thing is, the drone was already wounded. Post-mission analysis showed that the Martian dust, that fine, abrasive powder, had been sandblasting the blades for 3 years. The dust had eroded the leading edge of the blades, changing their shape. They were weaker. They weren't the same blades that had left Earth. The drone is now silent. It sits in the red dust, a tiny 4-pound monument to human genius. But its legacy, it changed everything. It didn't just shock the world with its footage of an ancient watery Mars. It proved that powered aerial flight on other planets isn't just possible, it's essential. Because of Ingenuity, a new massive drone named Dragonfly is being prepared. In 2034, it will descend onto Titan, Saturn's giant frozen moon. And new, more advanced helicopters are being designed for Mars. Ingenuity's footage was a window into another world. It showed us a mirror, a planet that was once just like Earth, with lakes, rivers, and volcanoes that lost its battle with the cosmos and became a frozen desert. It's a warning and a promise, all in one. The drone is silent, but its footage proved Mars had a past. Could it still have a present? Let us know your wildest theories below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.